Good evening. It is now 5:33, and I'd like to call the council meeting to order on December the 2nd, 2025. And Madam Clerk, could you conduct a roll call, please?
Rivimo?
Present.
Councillor Legree?
Present.
Councillor McWhorter? Councillor McDonald?
Present.
Councillor Sobalski?
Present.
Rivimo, we do have quorum.
Thank you. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of council and our community that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we're extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Are there any declarations of community interest? Councillor Sobalski.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve. I will be not participating in item C1 tonight as it pertains directly to me.
Great. Thank you. Seeing no other, we will move on to item C1, which is Mr. Fleming, please. Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, that Renfrew Town Council receive Integrity Commissioner Tony Fleming's final report in reference to file number 31176-53 dated November 18, 2025 as information, and further that any recommendations stated within the report are brought forward for council's consideration upon presentation. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McDonald, second, Councillor Legree. Thank you. And Mr. Fleming, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, Council has the report. So what I will do, Mr. Chairman, is provide a high-level overview, and then I'm happy to take questions from Council with respect to the recommendation for penalty. This is a report dealing with two members of Council, Councillors Sobalski as well as Councillor Dick. So we did it in one report since the subject matter of the report referenced the same Facebook post and a response to that Facebook post. The initial Facebook post was dated October 8, 2025. That was posted by Councillor Sobalski. Councillor Dick then responded to that October 8 post, and it is the post and the response to the post that are the subject matter of the report. I won't go through in detail the substance of the post and the response. That's contained in the report itself. What I will do is simply respond to the nature of the complaint and how we arrive at our findings. I think the highlights that I'd like to bring to Council's attention are simply that we did find that a number of the posts in the initial October 8 Facebook posts were in breach of the Code of Conduct, specifically sections 41, 92, 93. And this is really all dealing with comments directed towards staff. So what we have found is that the post specifically didn't identify named individuals. So it didn't name individual members of staff. And that was referenced by the councillor as a defense to the complaint. Our finding is that simply not using names doesn't render the conduct inoffensive under the code. The post mentioned an engineering team, it mentioned engineering. This is clearly referring to either the town's engineering staff or the consultants that were working on the specific projects. It's known who was dealing with those projects, and so that's sufficient in our opinion to trigger the responsibilities under the Code of Conduct. And I'd like to also explain that if it's a situation where council thinks they want more information, you can absolutely ask for more information. But you can do that in a respectful manner that doesn't disparage staff or call into question their professional qualifications and capabilities. And that is the heart of the complaint and our finding that there was a breach of the code, that the way in which or the manner in which the comments were drafted in the Facebook post engaged the code of conduct and were disrespectful to staff. So that was the basis for our finding that sections 4.1, 9.2, and 9.3 were breached by Councillor Sobalski. There was also an allegation that the councillor disclosed confidential information. We did not find that there was any breach of that section of the code. The councillor did not disclose confidential information. There was, however, a related component to that piece about confidentiality. In section 8.1 of the code requires that council accurately communicate decisions of council. So this was a direction of council in closed session about how to characterize communications on this topic. And so we can't get into what those directions were because that's a matter of confidentiality. We do note in the report that Councillor Sobalski wasn't present at that closed session, but staff did communicate to him what happened in the closed session and more specifically how council wanted these issues communicated. And our finding was that the manner in which Councillor Sobalski referred to the issue in the post of October 8 did not accurately respect or accurately report how council wanted that issue communicated, even though it was known to the councillor that that was an important piece of communication for council. So we did find that that was a breach of section 8.1. The final matter that was part of the complaint for Councillor Sobalski was that the tone or the tenor or the comments themselves in the post was alleged to be compromising or prejudging how council or how the councillor in question would deal with the deliberations of council. So if you'll recall, this was a post that predated, I believe by one day, the actual council meeting. So the allegation was that by the councillor saying, I think this, that, and the other thing about these topics that are on the agenda, that somehow breached the code because it was prejudging. We find that there's no prohibition in the code of conduct that would have prevented the councillor from doing what he did. It was only the manner in which he did it that breached certain sections of the code that I've talked about previously. So that's the rationale for our finding of a breach with respect to Councillor Sobalski. With respect to Councillor Dick, his response effectively supported the breach, and therefore, for the same reasons that we found Councillor Sobalski to be in breach of 4.1, 9.2, and 9.3, we found that Member Dick was in breach of those same sections. In addition to that, however, Member Dick also accused staff members of stonewalling and interfering with council's ability to make change. Again, similar to Councillor Sobalski, the fact that Member Dick didn't use any names isn't a defense to the breach of sections 4.1, 9.2, and 9.3. Accusing staff of stonewalling is not respectful, it is disparaging of staff, and for that reason we found those additional comments were also a breach of the code. When we get to the recommendation section, what we're recommending for council's consideration is a suspension of Councillor Sobalski's pay for up to a period of 20 days, or a period of 20 days rather. For Member Dick, we did note that this is the second investigation we've done from Member Dick. We're recommending a period of 15 days of suspension for Councillor Dick. With that, Mr. Chairman, those are my high-level summaries of the report. I'm happy to take questions from council about the recommendations.
Okay, first, I think what we'll do is we'll deal with Councillor Sobalski's, because my understanding is that once we've dealt with that, that then allows him to enter into the conversation about Councillor Andrew Dick.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Council, if you could just confine your comments to Councillor Sobalski at this point. Okay, thank you. And Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Reeve. And I'm just requesting, because there are some serious consequences with regard to these allegations that there's some latitude given us to speak with regard to it. I have, Mr. Fleming, I have a bunch of questions to ask you first. Stand by.
Thank you very much. Much better.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's very clear, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay. So I requested from the Reeve just some latitude because there's some serious consequences with regard to the allegations that were made. And I've got clarification on the format with the clerk earlier on. Reeve, any problem with me going ahead right now?
No, please.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Mr. Fleming. I, like others, have dealt with you over the last 3 years several times with regard to different situations and looking for input, and I do appreciate your approach to it. And my first series of questions are going to be short, except for the first one. So I'll touch with this. You were here before and we touched on the Integrity Commissioner report at a previous council meeting, and I just want to frame it so there's a proper understanding with regard to some people that may be watching the proceedings. So regarding, you receive a complaint and it meets your criteria, you become the investigator and subsequently a prosecutor, if we're talking terms that people understand, become a prosecutor if it's required with regard to your follow-through. In that, you do the investigation and you provide your recommendation for a penalty, much like a police officer and a prosecutor working hand in hand in a regular judicial proceeding. Does that make sense for the first part? Then I'll have a second one. Go ahead, please.
Certainly, and through you, Mr. Chairman, I would disagree with how you're characterizing it, only in the sense that a prosecutor and a police officer have much different roles and responsibilities than I do. My role is set out very clearly in the Municipal Act. My job is not to prosecute anyone. I'm not finding guilt or innocence. I'm simply investigating a complaint and determining or making findings of fact as to whether or not in my opinion, there has been a breach of the code. I then make recommendations to council who decide what to do with those recommendations. So my role is what it is. I don't think it's appropriate or necessary to characterize it as a prosecutor / police officer.
Thank
I just
you.
don't want to blur the role, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. And with regard to the, I'm thinking in terms of just an investigation being conducted and then recommendations, much, I guess, for me, like a prosecutor would be. Thank you for your input. I'm not trying to be combative, sir. I've got questions that I want to flush this out. So
sure.
The number two is town council, and this is my second part, then acts as a judge, and we'll get your input when I'm done, regarding the sentencing. You make the recommendation, we have to decide, but council also needs to incorporate a defensive role or perspective in that we possess sometimes more information on the background of the allegation. In a sense, we may have some more information with regard that you're able to attain through your investigative limitations and the capabilities. But most importantly, what I'm trying to get to is that someone needs to act and provide a defensive perspective, if that makes sense, because the individual, Councillor Cybulski at this point in time, can't speak for himself, or else he puts him into another position, right? So does that make sense that, yes, we have to decide on the final outcome in terms of your recommendations, but I think there's an onus on us to also look at it from a defensive perspective. Would that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what you mean by defensive perspective, but what I can say is this. First of all, and I think this is important for Councillor Cybulski to appreciate, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act has a specific exception that would allow the councillor to make submissions to council tonight on the matter of the penalty only. He's not entitled to vote on his own penalty, obviously, but he does have an opportunity to make submissions as to the penalty itself. So I just want to make sure the councillor understands that.
Continue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fleming. And what I mean by that is that, like in terms of what we see in a judicial process, right? Like the prosecutor will bring in their information, and the defense will try to expand and bring light to that situation. So I guess the first question, we're getting down to two quick questions now. Was this a single complaint or group submission?
This was a complaint by two individuals, but we dealt with it as one complaint. And just before we leave your first question, I don't think I answered the second part, or my second part. I'm not sure if it was your first or second. With respect to defense, The member of council had an opportunity to provide their, if you want to call it a defense, I call it a written submission to the complaint. So the member Cebulski and member Dick both had opportunities to engage fully with this process. It's not that I'm imposing something without their input. They have had that opportunity. So I don't agree that council has the role of being defense attorney, if I'm going to continue to use your analogy to the criminal process. What council's role is in this process is to do what council does every time staff bring a recommendation to council. You look at the recommendation, you understand the report itself, and we have an opportunity now if you have questions about the report, and then you make a decision to accept the report, or the recommendation rather, reject the recommendation, or amend the recommendation. Those are options available to council, and I would suggest your role is the same as your role as council throughout. And as part of that, councillor, I would agree with you that you have information about the councillor, about facts that I perhaps don't have, and that you can absolutely, as a councillor and as council, consider those other factors when you're deciding what to do with my recommendations. That's why the province gave to council the decision-making authority about those recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Continue. Thank you, Reeve. Mr. Fleming, on page 4 at the top, you identified that you interviewed, and it's plural, witnesses. How many were interviewed, and are you able to say who they are?
The Municipal Act requires that I keep the process of the investigation confidential, so I'm not going to answer those questions.
Okay, and I have no problem with that, but I'll still ask a few more, okay?
Of course.
Was the complainant from staff or outside our organization?
I won't answer those questions.
Did you speak to anyone regarding this complaint before receiving a hard copy of the allegations?
I honestly can't remember because, I hope you appreciate, Councillor, I've probably done 100 investigations in the last 3 years. Sometimes complainants will call me, but I will never, even though I don't remember the details of this particular complaint, I will never talk about the merits or the substance of a complaint with a complainant. I'm very clear that I need to remain neutral and impartial, so I don't take details, I don't give advice about what is or is not a complaint or how to frame the complaint. I will talk about process. Here's the form if they don't know where the form is, or if there is a form. Can it come to me directly? Does it have to go to the clerk first? How do we maintain confidentiality? Those sorts of process questions, but I will never, with a potential complainant, talk about the merits or lack thereof about a complaint. And I honestly I don't know whether that happened in this case or not.
Thank you, sir. I'm confirming this investigation was conducted remotely and that you didn't attend our location.
Correct.
And I have questions with regard to who you spoke to, but apparently you can't divulge that information. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you able to talk? I'll ask a question and you can answer it the way you want. Did you talk to anyone from the town engineering department or anyone from the engineering firm that provided this quote?
I'm not going to answer questions about who I talked to or what they may or may not have said.
Thank you. On page 2, under timeline of investigations, you have October 2025, you conducted interviews. Again, how many interviews did you conduct? I realize you can't divulge who you spoke to, but how many interviews did you conduct, not counting Councillor Dick or Councillor Cebulski?
I'm not going to give details about the investigative process.
Reeve, I'm okay for now, and I'll open the floor, but I have some other stuff after, okay?
Thank you. And Mr. Fleming can't confirm I asked those same questions some months back. He can't confirm that, but I'll tell you I did. Anyway, so very quickly, for me, one of the issues is top of page 7, Councillor Cebulski says, it appears that the engineering missed the fact that Renfrew was built on clay. Is it the pretty sad piece of that comment that caught your eye? Because I'll have to confess, that's a comment I may have made or would likely have made with an injection of a bit of sarcasm. So I've often struggled.
It's the entire statement, Reeve. It is questioning the professional capabilities of the engineering team or the engineers that is at issue. The pretty sad is obviously relevant because that's a pretty strong condemnation of the members' thoughts about their qualifications. And so I think this is a good point, perhaps as an education point or a place where we can have a teachable moment. What I'm not saying, what I don't want to say to council, and what I don't want council to walk away with, is a feeling that you can't question things, or you can't ask for clarification, or that you can't say to an engineer, I'm not understanding this point, get that information. Council needs to have the information it needs to make good decisions. What you are not to do under the Code of Conduct is criticize people and their professional abilities, capabilities in an open session of council. So you can do certain things, you can ask questions in a closed session of council if you're trying to give direction to staff about how to manage consultants, how you are or are not pleased, or what you're not pleased with respect to consultants. There is a process, or there are processes where council can do the things that you want to do in most cases. But what I'm trying to indicate to council is that what the Code of Conduct is all about is that public respect for the consultants. And if you think about it this way, and I'll use staff because staff consultants, it can be interchangeable. Council receives recommendations from staff routinely. Every meeting you get reports with recommendations from staff. The process you engage in is we take those recommendations and we make decisions as council based on those recommendations. And those decisions are policy or bylaw that are going to affect the residents of the town, and the town's residents are going to be expected to comply with those decisions of council. If council is criticizing the staff, then you have to extrapolate that to the process and the integrity of your process. If your process is built on the integrity of staff's recommendations, and your decisions are based on those recommendations, if you're routinely criticizing staff and questioning their professional capabilities, that bleeds into a situation where now the residents of the town of Renfrew have less respect for the process, less respect for the decisions of council, and you're eroding that entire process and the end result, which are bylaws and policies that you expect the town residents to follow. So that's the rationale or the reason why it's important that in public you not tear down those staff or tear down those consultants. But it's not to say that council can't exercise its role to question whether you're getting good information. It's how you go about doing it that's at issue. And in this case, the reason that I'm making my findings of a breach is that it was done in Facebook rather than another process that wouldn't have exposed staff and consultants to this public questioning of their qualifications.
Thank you. Okay, and I guess I'll ask another one. Your comment, and I'm struggling to find it right now, it caught my eye, and was it meant to be an eye catcher when you said that the question should be asked?
The question the member Cebulski should ask himself is, when was the last time he had a personal employment performance review conducted on Facebook or live streamed on YouTube?
Exactly, and I found that to be a little more provocative than some of the other things I've seen or heard you that I've seen you say or heard you say or written, so I'm curious about that.
I may be getting a little crustier in my old age, Reeve, but that was definitely intended to emphasize the point. And the point is exactly as I wrote it. Performance reviews are fine. Doing them in public is where we cross the line, and that's the point at which the code of conduct becomes engaged. So I'm doing two things. I'm trying to explain to council that you can still fulfill your function of asking questions, asking the hard questions, telling staff and or consultants, we don't like what you're doing. What's important is the manner in which you do it. And I use that analogy to try and drive home the point about why it's inappropriate to do it at an open session of council.
Okay, thank you. And I have to suggest that part of my question is envy, because I'd never quite thought of that one on my own, so thank you. Next, is there anybody else? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Reeve, and I do have a few different areas where I want to go. And again, I'm emphasizing, Mr. Fleming, it's not combative. I just want some answers to some of the different things that are floating around in my head, okay?
Understood.
Thank you. And so my first impression of this complaint, where you itemize a certain portion, I'll get to that in a second, is when I first read it, I thought it was it was aggressive professional language that was very subjective with a lot of what ifs and not based on any objective data. My concerns with the allegations were being very speculative and emotional, and I have concerns about that. And the part I'm referring to is page 2, middle of it, where you quote, Member Sobalski was intended to provoke reaction and cast doubt on the integrity of the staff and the corporation. Again, you're putting this in quotations with regard to the complainant. It went on to say the tone can reasonably be interpreted as disrespectful, intimidating, and potentially malicious in nature. I just found that to be like aggressive language and very speculative in terms of the ability to read someone's mind. I'm just interested in your opinion on that, please.
Sir, no, you're correct. That's a quote, so that came directly from the complaint itself. And so my intent is to try and communicate the manner in which the complainant received or interpreted the Facebook post. So what I'm trying to do here is express the seriousness with which the Facebook post was received by the complainant. And then we go on in the report and I go through how I analyzed it and my findings. But I think it's important for council to appreciate, because council obviously doesn't see the complaint, for council to appreciate that someone read that Facebook post and had a very strong reaction to it. And I think that's important for council to appreciate. Everyone's going to read certain things and have different reactions to them, but in my view, it's important to appreciate that some people took this in that way. Whether I read it that way or not, you can read the rest of the report and see how I approached it, but I thought it was important for council to appreciate that's how the complainant reacted to it.
Thank you. And Mr. Fleming, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but in this day and age with What's Up Renfrew, and everyone has an opinion on it, it's hard to control the different opinions that are out there. So I understand what you're trying to say, though, with regard to our role. I want to deal with your comments on walking the line, and that was referred to a couple times by you, and I know it comes from Councillor Sobalski, but it was shed in a negative light when, in terms of researching it, and it can mean several different things, but what I came up with is it's not a negative thing. If you're walking the line with regard to what you're commenting on, some of the comments that are made is that you're carefully balancing between two sides. You're trying not to offend, upset, or fully commit. You're being cautious and neutral, and you're trying to navigate a middle ground. So it seems that was pointed out in terms of your opinion with regard to it in a negative light, but it also from my research and looking at it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative light. You're just trying to balance out your approach with regard to your opinion. Your comment, go ahead, please.
I understand that completely, Councillor, and let me explain how I arrived at my conclusions. The fact that the councillor used that phrase to describe how he approached the post does exactly what you just described. The councillor is aware that there is a line that cannot be crossed, and by walking the line, the councillor is saying, I'm trying to stay on the right side of the line, but I know there is a line there, and I know I'm close to it. And then the councillor responds that he deliberately did not use names because he believed that would keep him on the right side as opposed to the wrong side of the line. So I read that as saying, yes, the councillor was alive to the issue that what he was doing and what he was writing could be construed in a negative way. And even though the councillor was trying to stay on the right side of the line, I found that he did not. He strayed across the line. But the fact that you're writing something knowing you're that close says to me that you're doing that very deliberately. You know you're close. You know you're making comments that are a little aggressive and a little bit confrontational when you're trying to stay on the right side of the line. If you don't want to cross the line, stay away from the line.
Thank you. Mr. Fleming, on to the next one. Councillor Cebulski preambled his entire post with his opinion, yet in the Integrity Commissioner report, he didn't mention what I think to be an important fact. We've been informed regularly that if we preface our comments with, in my opinion, it protects us generally from statements that may be made. And his opinion was, and this is what he prefaced it with, I'm just doing this for public information, the upcoming council meeting, Tuesday, September 9th, my pre-notes and thoughts for tomorrow's agenda, and in brackets, select items. And this is Councillor Cebulski's at the top of his post. And in brackets again, please note, the below are still to be debated, discussed, voted on at council. Nothing is final yet. Also, I'm only representing my opinion and not anyone else's. So could you top up on that? Like, to me, that was an important element of this whole thing, but it's not mentioned in the Integrity Commissioner report. But also your opinion with regard to his statement of his opinion, please.
Sure. I think the way the councillor framed it was absolutely appropriate. I take no issue with that. I think that's a good way to preface those statements. It's not decided, it's subject to debate, it is my opinion. All those things are very positive. But those positives don't make the statements less offensive. So it's like anything. If you say, well, in my opinion, well, it is your opinion, but your opinion can still breach the code of conduct. Mm-hmm. It's like saying no offense after you say something that's offensive. It doesn't make it less offensive. So I agree with you that the way that the councillor set up this post was appropriate completely. I think that's a great way to start it. And that wasn't in breach of the code, but it can't also take away from or negative the aspects that did breach the code. Just saying it's your opinion doesn't make it less offensive.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Next one, Reeve.
Please.
Thank you. Without knowing this was taking place in terms of a complaint had gone in, at one of our meetings shortly after this incident, the mayor made a statement along the lines that he had no problems with the Facebook post, and this was in a regular council meeting. He had some issues with perhaps some of the responses and all that sort of stuff. And I don't want to put words in the mayor's mouth, but he did state he had no problem with the Facebook post. Did you get any other opinions with regard to other individuals not having a problem? Because we also had the CEO made comment, again, in a public forum, that none of the directors had requested, this all hinges on the meeting being postponed because of this post, but none of the directors had any problems with proceeding that day with the meeting. Did you get any positive feedback from your interviews?
I was aware of the mayor's comments. That was part of some of the responses some response we received as part of our investigation. So I was aware of that. I can't recall off the top of my head whether I knew about the comment about the directors wanting to proceed or not caring about proceeding with the meeting itself. May or may not have had that. But Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chairman, the question in my mind is not whether any individual had a problem. I mean, I'll use the mayor's example because that's the example you used. Whether or not the mayor thought it was a problem is a fact, but it's not a determinative fact, because your code of conduct doesn't say don't disparage staff unless the mayor thinks it's okay. The code of conduct is written very plainly, and it says what it says about your interactions with staff. My role is to find whether or not the statement was made. In this case, that was dead simple. It was a Facebook post. It's not in dispute. And then I look at the code of conduct and I make a finding as to whether or not that statement breached the code of conduct or not. And that's my role. I don't do a doodle poll and ask people whether they liked it or disliked it or found it offensive or not offensive. My job is to make those decisions, make those findings, and then present that to council, which is what I've done.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming, and on to the next one. Are we able to, before I ask the question, are we able to receive a full disclosure with regard to the entire complaint? And again, going back to it's a major decision that has to be made with regard to the consequences. And I think for what you said earlier, we're not privy to that, are we? Like a full disclosure of the actual complaint?
That is correct. For the same reason, Councillor, that I mentioned that I wasn't going to talk about witnesses and so on, the complaint forms part of the investigation, and I'm directed by the Municipal Act to maintain the confidentiality of that process. What the Act says is that I have the discretion to disclose what elements I think are necessary to allow council to understand the allegations that are before it, the findings of fact, and so on. But that discretion is mine, and I do not provide the full complaint to anyone other than the members of council that are named in it.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. We're getting there. With regard to that, and that's something I have an issue with, because if you're in the judicial process, right, you do get full disclosure of the complaints, and people understand what they're working with. So, and I know it doesn't rest with you. It's just the process we're dealing with right now. I understand that, but that's one of my issues, that we do not receive full disclosure of the complaints, allegations, potential witnesses, or other relevant information, nor are we permitted to interview them, which would take place in a true judicial process, where full disclosure is a fundamental requirement. So I'm interested in your opinion on this, and this is where I'm going. So in a criminal investigation, evidence is assessed against the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest legal threshold in Canada, requiring strong, admissible, and corroborative evidence. By contrast, though, with your work, it uses a bit of a lower threshold of probabilities. Am I correct on that? And I'll get you to expand on that. So if you can just touch up on that.
Yeah, and I can answer that question and expand on it, Councillor. Yeah. First of all, in my view, characterizing or analogizing this process to a criminal process isn't the right way to look at this, because we are not imposing criminal penalties on anyone. The standard beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal standard is not the standard that applies. This isn't even civil litigation. This is an investigative, regulatory, not even really regulatory process. This is a statutory investigation, is probably the better way to put it. And you are correct that it is not a standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It is a standard that's called a balance of probabilities. So the standard of balance of probabilities means that it is more likely than not that something happened, 50% plus 1. Now in this case, the balance of probabilities doesn't really factor in, because in this case there is no fact that's in dispute. The Facebook posts by both Councillor Cebulski and Councillor Dick are what they are. They say what they say. There's no dispute there. So I didn't need to engage in an analysis of whether something was a fact beyond a balance of probabilities. The facts are simply what they are. And in terms of disclosure, council isn't responding to this complaint. Councillor Cebulski is responding to this complaint, and Councillor Cebulski did get a copy of the complaint. The names were redacted, but Councillor Cebulski also had an opportunity to submit his response to the complaint in writing. There was a full opportunity for the councillor to engage in this process. And council's role is not to make findings of fact. I've done that. Council has my report before it. You have my findings, you have my analysis in terms of breach. Council is only looking at, do you believe that the recommendations that I've made are appropriate or not? And if they're not appropriate, is there some alternative that you might move by way of an amendment to the recommendation? That's council's role. And in order to do that, I've given you what in my view is sufficient information and evidence to know what the allegation was, what it was about, what I found, and why.
Okay, thank you. Again, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. So this one, and I want you to comment on it. I'll give you my the narrative first. But we're going to be going back to the where I said in quotations earlier on, what I interpret as strong language, right, in terms of how they interpreted the complainant, that the tone can reasonably be interpreted as disrespectful, intimidating, and potentially malicious in nature. So with regard to that, and again, I want your comment at the end of it, we have a complaint that involves multiple levels of interpretation, each with the potential for differing perspectives. And I do want to understand everyone's perspective with regard to that. So with the first one is Councillor Cebulski and Councillor Dick themselves, the subjects of the complaint. They both have their own perspective, and one of them is with regard to walking the line, feeling he's doing the right thing but not taking one side or the other. The complaint themselves, because you have two of them, they interpret the councillor's actions through their personal lens. Then we have witnesses that you potentially may have talked to, offering their additional observations and interpretations. And then we have yourself, the Integrity Commissioner, assessing the complaint, adding another level of interpretation, and I'll use the example of walking the line where you have one comment with regard to it, but it differs completely potentially to where Councillor Cebulski might be. And then we have ourselves, lastly, with the three current members that are sitting here. So can you just touch up on that? I see 5 levels of and multiple individuals with different interpretations, creating a complex sort of chain of evidence and subjective viewpoints. So how do you navigate that, and what's your opinion on that as you do this process, please?
Sure. So it's not, in my view, a complex web of interpretation. What I have before me are words in Facebook posts. Those are the facts. What other people interpret them, or how other people rather interpret them, is a fact, I suppose, but I don't look at it in the sense of, I know the complainant had this view, and so I look at it through that lens. What I look at it through is my lens, because I'm the one who has to make the analysis, or do the analysis rather, of how do I take this fact, the Facebook post, and look at it through the lens of the language of the code of conduct. So I don't look at this in terms of this complainant thought it meant X, this complainant thought it meant Y, or the counselor thinks it means X or Y. What I'm looking at is not how does it make someone feel, if I could use that sort of generic way to approach it. I look at it as, I have a code of conduct that says certain things, and I'll just go to 4.1. Every member has the duty and responsibility to treat members of the public, staff, and each other in a respectful manner without abuse, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. So respect, abuse, bullying, harassment, intimidation. Those are the things that I am looking for and I'm looking at those words, and I look at the language in the post, and I say to myself, do these words engage any of those prohibitions? And that's the basis for what I did. And then as you read through the report, you'll see how I got to the place where I eventually came in terms of findings with respect to the analysis itself. But I do not use others' interpretations or how it made them feel when I'm doing that. I'm looking at it in a much different way to analyze it.
Please.
Thank you, Reeve. And we're near the end, Mr. Fleming. So I just want your opinion with regard to, and I'll use this, we deal with a first-time shoplifter who's did what they had to do. It affects the environment in terms of where they're at. But versus and they're probably going to get a slap on the wrist if nothing at all, if it's a first time. Versus, and I understand there's different dynamics there, but versus the consequences with regard to the Integrity Commissioner findings of 15 days. Can you equate how we 20 and 15 days. Can you equate how we get there? Like, it seems not heavy-handed on your end, but compared to if you look at what takes place in society right now, it doesn't seem compatible. One seems extreme, and the other seems to be you can let people off with a warning, if you know what I mean. So just your opinion on that.
Sure. And again, Councillor, I'm going to go back to disagreeing with your analogizing this to the criminal process. This is not a criminal process. There is voluminous sentencing case law that judges and justice of the peace deal with when they're looking at sentencing. I do not have that body of precedent to fall back on or to be hindered by or constrained by, however you want to consider this. What I have is a direction to provide a recommendation to municipal council as to what I think is an appropriate either penalty or sanction in this case. So what I look at is what the comments were. I look at, in this case, for Councillor Sobalski, I indicated this was the first time he'd been before us. So that has something to do with what I'm going to recommend. But I'm looking at effectively trying to say two things. One, as a council, is this behavior you want to condone or behavior you want to say to public and staff, we don't condone? And the quantum of that penalty says a lot about what you as council think about this behavior. And so in my opinion, 20 days strikes the appropriate balance between not being too heavy-handed and recognizing the nature of the comments and all of the facts that surrounded the post itself, but also saying to the member of council, this is not appropriate behavior and we are going to impose this as a penalty to ensure it doesn't happen again, and so that staff and consultants and the public know that council doesn't condone this kind of behavior. That's how I approach establishing the penalty.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you. And Councillor Legree, do you have anything to ask or any comments? Okay, thank you. So with that, I think we're able to set aside a conversation about Councillor Sobalski, and then to my understanding, we can talk about Councillor Dick, and Councillor Sobalski can join in this. Then when we go to after Mr. Fleming leaves us, when we talk about the consequences, then you'd have to remove yourself about the consequences about yourself, and then he could join us for the consequences about Councillor Dick, is how I understand the process. Does that make sense?
Confirming read through you. We're not voting on anything right now. We're just continuing. Thank you.
Just continuing the conversation. So with that, Councillor Sobalski, you can join us with regards to Councillor Dick. And Mr. Fleming, if you could proceed with Councillor Dick, please. And to the public and to Mr. Fleming, I had two conversations with Councillor Andrew Dick, asking him if he wanted us to defer this or delay it until he was back. He said no, he didn't. It didn't matter to him. The clerk also sent him a follow-up email just to make sure we had something in writing, and again, he confirmed that he had spoken to me and that it was okay to go ahead. So we've scheduled them together as part of the report. I had spoken to Councillor Sobalski too, to make sure that, you know, the impact, should Councillor Dick have requested a period for it to wait, whether he would be able to accommodate us as well, or whether he wanted. So anyway, Councillor Dick said no, go ahead with it. So, Mr. Fleming.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I've discussed Councillor Dick in my overall summary, so I'm just happy to take questions from Council with respect to Councillor Dick and our findings in the report.
Thank you. And Councillor McDonald, please. Thank you, Mr. Fleming. You'll be happy to know I only have one one area I'd like you to comment on. So with regard to Councillor Dick's, stand by. I just want to read it first so that we have it on the record here. His response, Councillor Dick, is, well said, Councillor Sobalski. It has been more than frustrating these last few months, years. We go in with the mindset of changing the world and making things better, then get stonewalled by individuals. I join you with being embarrassed at this all. Let's keep fighting the good fight, sir. So where I'm going with this one, Mr. Fleming, is with regard to the comments you make with regard to the individual. And I think from the integrity, from the report itself, it seems to be directed towards staff. And I'll just read you what I have, and then you can comment on it afterwards. In terms of your investigation, you find Councillor Dick in breach because he endorsed Councillor Sobalski's post. Even though others have stated that they had no problems with the original post, it just seems Councillor Dick gets singled out, and I get it's a Facebook post. Then Mr. Fleming, you stated that by using the term individuals, Councillor Dick is referring to staff. I don't agree with this. No one, and this is the rationale, that no one really knows who he's referring to. It could have been fellow councillors or someone from the public. We simply don't know, and we have nothing else to corroborate your position. And for me, I'd rather err on the side of caution, as I can't read Councillor Dick's mind, and we have absolutely nothing else to substantiate the claim that he's referring to staff. So again, your input, sir, please.
Certainly. Those are my findings, Councillor. So if you disagree with my findings, then you can reflect that in your vote on my recommended penalty. But my finding is what it is. That is how I have approached this. This is the way I have analyzed it, and that is how I have presented it to Council. So that's all I can tell you, is this is how I arrived at my decision. This is the decision that I've arrived at.
Okay, thank you.
That's how I interpreted it.
Okay, and if I could just, the third last sentence on the last page, where you say that, unlike the previous report, Member Dick is unapologetic about his comments in this instance. I'm left with the impression, should he have been contrite, that your recommendation might have been less severe. Is that a fair reading of that, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I don't think you're reading too much into it, Mr. Chairman. Where members of council step across the line, I'm using that analogy again, but where they step across the line, it does have an impact on my recommended penalty if they acknowledge they've made a mistake, apologize, and endeavor to do better the next time. In this case, that's not how the member approached his response.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Reeve, through you. And in fairness, Mr. Fleming, if he truly believed he did nothing wrong, and I expect nothing else than for him to then acknowledge that he's not going to apologize. Like, in his mind.
And that's entirely the councillor's prerogative, Council. I don't disagree with you. If he thinks he's done nothing wrong and he has nothing to apologize for, that's his prerogative. Absolutely. I don't see it that way. We can all learn from our mistakes. And a refusal to learn from your mistake, in my view, represents a situation where the councillor is not prepared to change how how they approach interactions with staff. And that's part of the reason why you have the recommendation for penalty in front of you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've been fair as a council in probing and maybe protecting the integrity of our members. Is it possible for you to remind us of our duties to our staff? Is that within your purview to remind us if there, specifically if there are sections of the Municipal Act? And I look at, the CEO function where it says participate and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. In the section 226.1, and then I also look up at where was that? There was something that talked about the head of council. I'm sorry, I've lost it, but it in essence says to embrace the role and the purposes of the municipality.
I can't give legal advice, Mr. Chairman, with respect to whether you have an obligation to sort of quote-unquote protect staff. This report is not really about protecting staff so much as it is trying to acknowledge that there is a real power imbalance between members of council and staff. And when members of council use the power that they have in a public setting to disparage staff or say things that are offensive related to their professional capabilities and so on, staff are in a position where they really can't defend themselves in that public forum. And so we have to recognize that power imbalance, and that's why codes of conduct exist in large part, is to ensure that that dynamic is understood and respected, and we don't have work environments where staff are reluctant or uncertain about coming to council meetings because they're afraid to be berated by council members in that public forum. So that's part of my role, is to try and ensure that staff have that sort of protection, and then council gets my recommendation and you decide, just like what I talked about when we were talking about the penalty, are you going to condone this kind of behavior, or are you going to send a message that this is not appropriate behavior? That's the decision that rests with council right now.
Okay, thank you. And one final question, maybe, hopefully. The code of conduct, is it described as an administrative policy, or is it legislative in nature? Can you offer an opinion on that?
The code is a mandatory policy that all municipalities in the province have to have. So the Municipal Act requires every municipality to have one, and to also have an integrity commissioner. So it is a statutory process.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from members of council? All right. Mr. Fleming, thank you very much. As always.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Learning something new. Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. So I would ask Councillor Cybulski to step back. I know he was going to anyway, and he's doing that, as we talk about punishment consequences under the Code of Conduct and the report. So I'm interested in hearing from council. I know me personally, I'm going to say I've struggled with this. One of the things about council is that even though you have disagreements with people, you grow to have a certain affection for them, or affinity for them, or enjoy your time with them. And I have to say that with regard to Councillor Cybulski, we've disagreed on maybe 60-40 of our decisions, or maybe it might be 75-25. But whatever it is, we've certainly enjoyed any number of conversations, whether in the chambers or in public, on the phone, and so it's difficult to pull back from that and balance it with the responsibility, as Mr. Fleming has noted, to be mindful of the imbalance between staff and council. So I'm going to try and keep that in place. And you know, the one thing that I've looked at is Section 225, Section 224D of the Act, and I'll just read it to you. Is the role of council to ensure that administrative policies, practices, and procedures and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council. So that's what is kind of guiding me. So I think we have to have a consequence. I'm just not sure what it is yet. So I'm just laying out where I am with this. I don't believe that we cannot have a consequence. I'm not a fan of ordering people to apologize. I think they either do or don't on their own accord, and they indicate that. So that's not where I'm headed. But I'd like to hear more before I start trying to craft a response. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Legree, and then Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Reeve Emo. This is definitely tough for sure. Councillor Zabalski is a great councillor. He sits here at this table with all of us, I'm sure I know for a fact, to make Renfrew a better place and move it forward. I don't think he had any intention of harm to any staff members or anything like that. I think just frustrated, and I don't want to put words in Councillor Zabalski's mouth, but this is how I've kind of taken it. The frustration here over the last 3 years, there's been lots of ups and downs, and I know sometimes I go home at night too, and I just don't even want to talk to anybody. I'm frustrated and stuff like that. But I do agree with some of the findings, I will say. And I think that maybe the post could have been worded maybe a little bit different, I guess I will say. I do feel that 20 days, 20 days suspension of pay is too much. But I also believe that something has to be there. So in my mind, I was looking at like 10 days where he could suspension of pay for 10 days where it gets donated to a charity of his choice.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is continue with our standard practice, which is becoming a standard practice where we don't really make a motion. We sort of talk a little bit till we get to a point where somebody makes a motion. And we'll see. So, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Reeve. And I have a real issue with the fact we don't get full disclosure, and with the system that's formatted for municipal governments, because it's a lot different than even the federal or provincial levels, and it's a lot different than the judicial process that we normally see. And until I see meaningful reforms or very clear and indisputable objective evidence, I'm fine to treat this report solely as information for public awareness, not as a basis for action. The reason why is because we're talking about Facebook posts and the exposure that came from there, and that people were frustrated from it. But this format that we're in right now, as far as I'm concerned, for something at this level is more than enough in terms of the exposure. People can make up their minds, and we're going to get a split on opinions on that anyway. But this type of format where we've just talked about this for the last hour brings more exposure than any Facebook post could. So I'm fine with accepting it as a recorded vote, and it's on the public record. And that, for me, this exposure that we have is more than enough consequences, especially when we can't get full disclosure. We don't know who the complainants are. It's not in terms of a process, and I'll use the word fair, I don't see it as a fair process, and that's my opinion.
I have an opinion, but I'm not going to share it for obvious reasons. I need to ask the clerk something. So if one of my friends makes a motion and nobody seconds it, I can't second it as councillor, as chair, right? Correct? So we could end up having, in theory, two motions that have no seconders, and we just call it a draw and move on. Is that a reasonably fair?
Reeve, can I throw this on the floor? I'll make a motion then to simply accept this report as information, and I'd like a recorded vote.
And now, Madam Clerk. No, I'm just saying, there needs to be a seconder.
Oh, sorry. Whoa. Sorry, I just hit a button on my side. So typically, the chair cannot second a motion. We are in a unique situation with very limited members of council and quorum here. So it would be up to you as the chair to determine if in this case, moving and seconding the motion is what you would consider a fair process, but it is in your determination under the procedural bylaw. There is loose wording on that.
Okay, so, yes, Councillor.
Reeve, through you, as you're making up your mind with regard to this, it is unfortunate we're down to 3 of us, but that's the reality we face, and I'd rather deal with it if we can properly without having to put you in a position where there could maybe be a grievance later on. I'm trying to choose my words carefully. That's all. Things to think about.
So I'm prepared to make a ruling that in this instance, because we don't have enough people, that I am not going to look for a seconder for any motions that come forward. Okay? So with that, I believe Councillor MacDonald has made a motion and asked for a recorded vote.
Thank you.
I had the motion and it disappeared on me. And basically that the Renfrew Town Council receive the Integrity Commissioner's Code of Conduct complaint file 31176-53 as information. It's moved by Councillor MacDonald, as he's the one who requested it. I will start with him.
In favor?
I would go to Councillor Legree.
Not in favor.
And then Rivimo.
I'm opposed.
Okay, so the motion fails 2-1.
Councillor Legree, please.
Through Yuri Vimo, I'd like to put a motion on the floor, I guess. Not to go with the full 20 days, but cut it back to 10 days, where I guess a suspension of pay for 10 days where Councillor Sobalski can decide where to donate it to a charity of his choice.
Okay, you've heard the motion.
I'll take a recorded vote too.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Discussion? Okay, and the recorded vote, please.
Okay, through you, Chair. As the motion was put forward by Councillor Legree, I'll start there.
In favor.
Councillor MacDonald
Against.
and Rivimo.
I'm in favor.
Motion is carried 2-1.
Okay, and now, does Councillor require a break, or should we go ahead with Councillor Andrew Dick? Okay, we'll go ahead. Councillor, so I will take a motion or a series of motions on Councillor Andrew Dick. And Councillor MacDonald, please.
Thank you, Reeve. Same rationale as I had for the previous one, and the same motion, that we accept it as information, and we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And in this instance, now that we have more bodies, I would prefer to have a seconder. Okay. Then I'll make a ruling, because I really feel that we need to have this out there and decided on, that I will second the motion for discussion.
And thank you, Reeve, and a recorded vote. I don't know if I stated that.
Okay. One sec. So you didn't.
What's that? Doing different things.
Okay. Through you, Reeve. Councillor MacDonald, as you were the one who put the motion forward, this is to receive the report as information only. I will start with you.
In favor?
Councillor Legree.
Opposed.
Councillor Sobalski.
Abstain?
Revimo?
I'm opposed.
So it's abstain does count as a nay in our procedural bylaw, so it is defeated 3-1.
Thank you. Councillor Legree, please.
Through you, Revimo, I'd put a motion on the floor, similar to Councillor Sobalski, just bringing back the days from 15 to 10 also. So suspension of pay for 10 days, where Councillor Dick can decide on what charity, be the same thing, that the suspension monies would go to a charity of his choice.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McDonald, are you seconding it?
No.
Okay.
Is it on the floor yet? I do have a
Not-
comment.
not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the spirit of fairness, I will rule that I should second it. I seconded it. Thank you. And Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. And with regard to the metrics being used for this, I think you divided the first one by half. And if we don't have anything else to substantiate it, I feel if you're going to go ahead with this motion, it should be the same rationale. So to divide it by 2 or 50%, if you're going ahead with this.
So you can amend it as the mover, and then possibly the seconder would agree.
Yes, so I'll amend it to 50% of the 15 days.
Which would be 7.5 or 7? 7, thank you. And as the seconder, I would agree with my friend. And he'd like a recorded vote.
Okay, through you, Revimo, since Councillor Legree, it was motion that was put forward so the motion would be amended to be 7.5 days suspension of pay to be paid to the charity of choice.
7 days is just easier, I think, math.
Sorry. Okay, just 1 second. Missed that. Okay, Councillor Legree, I'll start with you.
In favor.
Councillor McDonald?
Opposed.
Councillor Sobalski?
In favor.
Revimo?
I'm in favor.
Motion is carried 3-1.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes our deliberations on this matter. I want to say thank you to council. These moments are very difficult because you're not several sword lengths apart like you are in the 2 other legislatures, and this is as an important a legislature as the other 2, probably more so, because we're left in the environment where we have to work with each other 5 seconds after the vote was taken. We can't run off to our caucus rooms and high-five each other. Yeah, we really got them. We can't do that. We have to just buckle down and pass the budget next, and then amend a certain number of policies next year as per our operational plan. So I certainly appreciate the delicacy with council framed its debate. I also appreciate the genuine desire to get to a reasonable conclusion without defaming or demonizing our 2 members of council. And I certainly appreciate the efforts to try and nail down this legislation. I understand the frustration with not getting full disclosure. It's not in my nature to not challenge things, and I like to know what I'm talking about when I challenge, so I certainly can appreciate that viewpoint. Having said all that, thank you. This could have been a terrible clash which would spill over into every decision that we make. So, again, thank you, and I appreciate the efforts of everyone. And to Councillor Sobalski, I know this is probably one of the longest hours of your life to have people sit and talk about you, around you, near you, whatever. So I certainly appreciate your patience and your strength of character. Having said that, I would suggest to you that we'll adjourn the meeting at 6:50. We'll be adjourning with the understanding that we are meeting again on September the 9th. We have a council meeting. We have special council meeting in the morning at 10, and then, no, we don't have a closed session? Oh, great.
No.
Good.
No.
December.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please do the dates.
Through you, Reeve, and I do apologize because you are operating blind at the moment, so that's my fault. So the upcoming meetings of council, so there's an Economic Development Advisory Committee on December 9th at 10 a.m. The special meeting of council regarding closed is December 9th at 12 p.m. And then there's the regular meeting council at 5:30 p.m. that same night.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I lost the battle with their laptop again today, so I left it in the bag to cool down. So having said that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. It will be at 6:50. Thank you very much again.